Okay, so if you remember, uh-oh, just your basic multiplying of fractions. Let's say if you have P over Q times R over S, that would just be P times Q, P times R over Q times S. Okay. So if we use that with just regular, ordinary, everyday numbers, let's say we have 7 over, let's say 7 over 5 times 2 over 3. You just multiply your numerator straight across and your denominator straight across. So that's just 7 times 2 over 5 times 3 is 14 over 15. Okay. But you also had times where you could simplify it a little bit. So let's say, for example, if you had, let's say 5 over, let's say, put a different number. 5 over 8 times 8 over 9. I'll just pick something that easily cancels out. Okay, so that's just going to equal 5 times 8 over 8 times 9. And anything divided by itself can just cancel out to equal 1. Okay, so you just end up with 5 over 9. Okay, so the exact same rules apply to rational numbers. Okay, so let's say, for example, if you wanted to multiply say 25x over 2 times, let's say, 1 over y to the third. Okay. You just multiply it right across. So 1 over y to the third is just 25x times 1 over 2 times y to the third. So you just get 25x over 2y to the third. Okay. Or let's say you even had one that's a little trickier. So if you want to multiply, let's say, x squared plus x over 3x times 6 over 5x plus 5. Okay. Now these are the ones that you're most likely to run across here. Okay, so if you have, make sure that's up far enough, x squared plus x over 3x times 6 over 5x plus 5, you just multiply your numerators and your denominators. Well, first, actually you factor before you do that. Okay, so x squared plus x, you can factor an x out of both of those. Say if x times x plus 1 over 3x, or 3 times x, times 6 over, you can factor 5 out of both of those. So you have 5 times x plus 1. Okay, and now you multiply. Clean that up a little bit. Okay, so you just multiply your numerators, then you multiply your denominators. So you have x times x plus 1 times 6 over 3 times x times 5 times x plus 1. Okay. Remember, your goal is to just have multiplication across everything. Because if you have multiplication across everything, you can start to cancel out. So here, you have an x plus 1 and x plus 1 cancels out. And here, instead of 6, if you made that 2 times 3, I'll just put a little note, 2 times 3 equals 6. You can cancel out your 3's. Does that make sense? All right. Okay. So that means from there, the only thing that didn't cancel out up here is the x and the 2. Oh, let me bring that up some. Okay, so you have 2 times x. And the only thing that, oh, I forgot to cancel out those x's. Good thing we catch those. So you have 5 and you have an x down here, so you have 5 times x. And just in case you miss one, you can always cancel it again later, which we did here. We missed the x's. Those cancel out. So you end up with 2 over 5. All right. So any questions on that one? No, right? Okay, let me finish writing that. All right. Okay, so here we'll just go over the steps for multiplying rational numbers. Okay, so your first step, you want to factor all of your numerators and denominators. Okay, and then once you factor them out, you just multiply the numerator times the numerator and denominator times the denominator. So we have numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. Okay. Now your third step is you're going to simplify it and cancel out only if you can, only if there's something that it has in common. So simplify by combining like terms. That means if you have a 2 up top and a 3 up top, you can just multiply them together to get 6. Or if you have an x and another x that won't cancel out, you can just make them x squared, depending on the problem. Or canceling out common factors. Oops. Okay, so let's say, for example, if we wanted to multiply, let's say 3x plus 3 divided by 5x squared minus 5x times 2x squared plus x minus 3 over 4x squared minus 9. Excuse me. So here you have 3 different types of factoring going on in one problem. Okay, you have a difference of squares here. Here you have the A times C method. Or some call it factoring by grouping. And for these two, you just factor out the greatest common factor. Okay, so that's why we spent so much time on the factoring, because this entire section all revolves around factoring. So if you're still unsure about factoring and the videos and notes didn't help, definitely let me know and we can go over it again. Okay, so if you have 3x plus 3 or 5x squared minus 5x times 2x squared plus x minus 3 over 4x squared minus 9. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of work each of them out individually on the side. Okay, so if you have 3x plus 3, you can just factor a 3 out of both of those. So that's 3 times x plus 1. Okay, so this numerator just becomes 3 times x plus 1. Okay, same thing here. You can factor a 5x out of both of those. So 5x squared minus 5x. If you factor the 5x out of both of those, you just get 5x times x plus 1. Okay. So if you're ever unsure about your factoring, just distribute it out, and you'll see you'll end up right back there. Oh, minus, sorry for that. Okay, so this denominator becomes 5x times x minus 1. Okay, so that's times, a little bit bigger, 2x squared plus x minus 3. And again, we're going to use the A times C method. Okay, so you know your A is equal to 2. Your B is equal to 1. And your C is equal to negative 3. We'll move that up a little bit. Okay, which means that A times C is 2 times negative 3, which is negative 6. Okay, so we have to find two numbers that multiply to equal negative 6, and those same two numbers have to add to equal your B, which is 1. So two numbers that multiply to equal negative 6. Those same two numbers add to equal 1. Any ideas?
3 and negative 2.
Yep, 3 and negative 2. So 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. And 3 plus negative 2 is positive 1. Okay, so now we're going to replace our x value with those two. Or say 1 times x. with 3x minus 2x. Okay, so if you have our 2x squared plus x minus 3 will now become 2x squared plus 3x minus 2x minus 3. And then we just factor by grouping once we get there. Okay, so make sure factor by grouping. Okay, so remember, you factor by grouping, you just take the 4 terms and make 2 smaller groups. Okay, so if we factor an x out of both of those, we get 2x plus 3. If we factor a negative 1 out of both of those, we end up with 2x. Negative 1 times 2x plus 3. Okay. And whenever you're unsure, remember, all you have to do is just distribute it out, and it'll take you right back where you started. Sometimes you'll factor it out and go, okay, that doesn't look right, and then you'll try to distribute it and pretty much see, hopefully, where you may have missed. Okay. Now, if these two are the same, you can just factor both of them out. Oh, move that up a little bit. Okay, so you have 2x plus 3. Go ahead and cross those out. And you have x minus 1. Uh-oh. Okay, so sometimes it can be a little bit lengthy. Okay, so that means we can replace this with 2x plus 3 times x minus 1. Let me go back up a little bit. There we go. And the 4x squared minus 9. I'll move that up some. So 4x squared minus 9. You can just replace that with 2x squared, which is just 4x squared, minus 3 squared. Okay. So once you have your difference of squares, it's 2x plus 3 and 2x minus 3. Okay, so that means you can replace your 4x squared minus 9 with that. So 2x plus 3, 2x minus 3. Okay. Now, if you wanted to, you could cancel the numerator and denominators from here, but I just like to have them as one neat little fraction. Okay. So we factored it. This is your first step. Okay. Then your second step, you're just going to multiply it across. So you have 3 times x plus 1 times 2x plus 3 times x minus 1. You don't need the little multiplication dots. I just kind of put them there. Over 5 times x minus 1 times 2x plus 3 times 2x minus 3. All right. Then once you have it all factored out and it's just all multiplication, now you can start canceling out the numerator and denominator. Okay, so if you have a 2x plus 3 here, you can cancel that out with this 2x plus 3 there. Okay, if you have an x minus 1 here, you can cancel it out with that x minus 1 there. Okay, so you don't have anything else that can cancel out. You don't have any 3's down here. You don't have any x plus 1's down here. No 5's or anything up there. So you don't have anything else that can cancel out. Once you run out of things to cancel out, you have your answer. Okay, so 3 times x plus 1 over 5 times x times 2x minus 3. So don't really need that down here in the final answer. Okay, so that would be your final answer. All right, so any questions on that one? Yes.
Would you just, like, need to distribute that?
You shouldn't, but if it won't take that answer, then you might have to distribute it. But for the most part, this should be okay. It's hard to tell with like computer programs. This may be okay in some, it might not be okay in others. So.
But, like, on the test, that would be fine.
Oh yeah, if you're on the test, that would be okay. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Leave that up for a few seconds in case anyone's still writing. All right. Okay, so let's say, for example, here, you wanted to multiply 8x squared minus 8x over x squared plus x minus 56 times 3x squared minus 22x plus 7 all over x minus x squared. Oops. Okay. So remember, your first step is you just want to factor all of your numerators and denominators. Okay. So just like before, we're just going to do all of that messy work on the side. Okay, so we know, let me just rewrite it, 8x squared minus 8x over x squared plus x minus 56 times 3x squared minus 22x plus 7 over x minus x squared. Okay, so if we just factor an 8x out of this one, so 8x squared minus 8x, we end up with 8x times x minus 1. Okay, so we can just rewrite that one as 8x times x minus 1. And this one, that's one of the less complicated factoring problems, because all you have to do when there's nothing in front of the x squared, so clean that up a little bit, is find two numbers that multiply to equal your c, and those same two numbers add to equal your b. Any ideas?
8 and negative 7.
Yep, 8 and negative 7. 8 times negative 7 is 56, and 8 plus negative 7 is 1. So that means this just becomes x plus 8, x minus 7. Okay, so you just go ahead and replace that with x plus 8 times x minus 7. Okay, So now we go ahead and do this one, which looks like the old A times C method. Okay, so we know your A is equal to 3. We know your B is equal to negative 22. And your C is equal to 7. Okay, so that means your A times C is equal to 3 times 7, which is 21. Okay. So we have to find two numbers that multiply to equal 21 and add together to equal your B, which is negative 22. Any guesses?
Negative 21.
Yeah, negative 21 and negative 1. So negative 21 times negative 1 is positive 21. And negative 21 plus negative 1 is negative 22. Okay. So now, once we do that, we just have to get those two numbers and replace our B. Okay, so we're going to replace negative 22x with negative 21x and negative 1x. Move that up a little bit. All right. Okay, so that means our 3x squared minus 22x plus 7 will now become 3x squared minus 21x minus 1x. Plus 7. Okay. Now, if you put negative 1 minus 21, you still get the same thing. Or negative 1x minus 21x. The only difference is they'll switch the factors up. Okay. So now we factor by grouping. Okay, so when you factor by grouping, you just take that and make it two smaller terms. Okay, so for this term, your greatest common factor would be 3x. So if you factor out a 3x, you end up with x minus 7. Oh, close that up. And here you can actually factor out a negative 1. So most of the time you can always tell what you're looking for over here, especially when you have that middle term that's negative. If it's x minus 7 over here, then you're going to want an x minus 7 over here. So this first one is almost always your guide. So if you factor out a negative 1 here, you end up with x minus 7. You can always double check by distributing that out. You'll get negative x plus 7, so you know that's right. And as soon as you have these match, you can just factor it right out. So you have x minus 7. And once you factor it out, just go ahead and cross it out. The only thing left is 3x minus 1. Okay, so we can replace our 3x squared plus 22x, well, minus 22x plus 7 with x minus 7, 3x minus 1. Okay, so after all of that, we can go back up to our x minus 7, 3x minus 1. Let me move that up a little bit. And the last one, you just really have to factor an x out of both of those. Oh, move it up too far. Oh, there we go. Factor an x out of both of those. So x minus x squared is just x times 1 minus x. I don't know why this side angle it looks fuzzy.